I'm Bryce Zabel. Have you ever wondered if there's a secret connection between Hollywood and UFOs?
I'm Brent Friedman, and you are listening to Sound, Light, and Frequency.
Will Steven Spielberg's Disclosure Day be just another movie? Or will it answer the question once and for all, are we alone?
And if we aren't alone, do they walk amongst us?
You know, Steven Spielberg is 79 years old, and he's going to be 80 years old Christmas week this year. He started making movies, though, when he was 17 years old, and he had a film called Firelight, which was about, you probably guessed it already, UFOs. Now, he's had 6 decades of filmmaking since then. He's built probably the most influential body of alien contact storytelling that's ever been assembled. That includes more than 30 film and TV projects that he's either directed, written, or executive produced that touch on NHI or UFOs or the question of, are we alone? And now, of course, the buzz is that he's coming back to the subject with Disclosure Day, which opens on June 12th, and it may well function as his closing argument on the entire topic. At the recent CinemaCon, Spielberg put it this way, and this is a quote, "I believe this movie is going to answer questions, and this movie is going to cause a lot of people to ask a lot of questions. All you need to get from beginning to end is a seatbelt." That's quite a statement from the director. Let me bring in my co-host, Brent Friedman. Brent, what do you think? That's setting the bar kind of high, isn't it?
It is. And I think that if anyone could set the bar that high, it's Steven Spielberg. As you said, his body of work on this topic is incredible, but it's not just the quantity of stuff he's done, it's the quality. Some of his work in this area is acknowledged to be the best in the business. And his vision for alien contact, for NHI contact, is wide ranging. He has told dark stories, he's told light stories, he's told funny stories, he's told pretty much every kind of story you can tell in this genre. And so if anyone could make a statement like he just did at CinemaCon, it's Steven Spielberg.
It's so amazing. He starts with Close Encounters and follows it with E.T., but along the way, he's also done Taken and War of the Worlds and, frankly, so many other things, the whole spectrum. In order to talk about what might be coming with Disclosure Day, though, instead of trying to just analyze his trailers, which we did already, I thought we should try something different. This time, folks, what we're going to do is take a look back at those 30 projects, maybe not each one of them, but at least talk about the body of work, if you will, and see if there's some clues embedded in all that about what he may be getting ready to present to the world on June 12th. And the key here is that we're not going to do it alone. This is an important episode for us, Brent, because this is the first time we've had a guest.
Yes, it's very exciting. I got my office all cleaned up before company
I did the
arrived.
same thing. I thought, hey, it's like you're having people come over for dinner. It's,
Exactly.
gee, I got to clean up. So I went over through my desk and went, I got to get rid of some of this stuff. This looks bad. It's the wrong thing. And as it turns out, I think our guest is going to make both of our backgrounds look pretty paltry anyway. We're being joined by a special guest tonight, someone who literally wrote a book that Spielberg liked so much that he turned it into a movie. So let me introduce you folks to Ernie Cline, who is here joining us from Texas. Ernie, welcome. I see a couple of DeLoreans there.
Not
Days
one, but two.
Days DeLoreans, as my wife calls them. Yes, I have a pair. This is my first DeLorean, Ecto 88, which is a recreation of the DeLorean in my book and in the movie. It's a mashup of the Ghostbusters Ectomobile, Doc Brown's Time Machine, and with some Knight Rider and Buckaroo Banzai thrown in. And then this one is the Mandalorian. It's my Star Wars DeLorean. It has an R2 unit on the back. And I'm going to take this one out on Star Wars Day here next week. I'm excited.
That is so amazing. And we should probably at least bring everybody up to speed, though. You are an American science fiction writer. The book that got turned into a movie was Ready Player One. You wrote another book as a follow-up, Armada. And I believe you're probably working on another book right now, which we could break some news and you could tell us what it's all about, or you could not do that. Okay.
No, I try not to talk about it before I finish it. You know how that is. You talk about it before you finish it, it slows you down.
Yeah, that can be certainly a problem. Well, listen, the thing that I think most people who are listening or watching right now are going to be thinking is, wait a second. This dude had Steven Spielberg make a movie from his book, which means I think that you were on the set for a Steven Spielberg movie.
I was. I got a co-screenwriter credit on a Steven Spielberg movie. It's pretty great. For my second film credit, it's pretty amazing. While it was happening, I would joke, but wasn't really a joke. It was like, it's all downhill from here. What could ever top this? And that movie, we had to move our release date because the Star Wars The Last Jedi took our release date. So they moved it to March 29th, which is my birthday. So my Steven Spielberg movie came out on my birthday. Every copy of the poster you see has my birthday at the bottom. I was like, whoever's running the simulation, you guys are doing an awful job. I am not buying this anymore. Yeah.
It's funny you say simulation. Just to wander off into the weeds here, some people say, well, I can explain the whole thing that's going on with UFOs and aliens and all that. We're all part of a simulation. Do you believe that?
Well, I think that once a simulation becomes indistinguishable from reality, it no longer matters whether or not it's a simulation. Whatever reality is that we're in may as well be a simulation that we're trapped in. We can't get out of it until we die and don't find out the nature of it until we die. If then, you're still not going to step in front of a moving train, regardless of what you think the nature of reality is. So I think that's like a circular argument. Reality is whatever it is. When you're studying the double slit experiment and all of that, I feel like it's, people were inside a simulation, like studying the pixels or studying the code, regardless of what's happening at the quantum level, we're all still here and we're sharing this reality. It's a fun argument, but it's not, I don't know, from my perspective, not always relevant. It's more exciting to talk about what's going on in this reality, whatever it is pretty wild,
to say the least. Brent,
yeah.
I'm into this wall here. Go ahead.
I completely agree. I feel like if this is a simulation, it's so good that there's no point in talking about it as a simulation. It's so real to us that even if someone told us and put up on a whiteboard a formula that proved it was a simulation, it really wouldn't change anything. It would just be like, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah,
unless someone's going to give me the God code, right, where I can go in and take control of the simulation, that's a different situation. But short of that, then I don't care. Simulation, reality, it's still where I live, and I have to get up every day and pay the bills and do the work and record the podcast.
Yes.
This must happen. Hey, Ernie, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know people are probably thinking this. They're saying, hey, so he's on the set with Steven Spielberg and Spielberg's got his headphones on and he's directing action and all that. Does Steven Spielberg ever go, hey, Cline, get over here?
Oh, all the time.
You need to do this. What do you think? Did he ever do that?
All the time. He is the best. Just picture your dream of how you would want it to be. Working with a director, and even a famous one. He's been freaking out people with how amazing his art is for so long. It's the Spielberg effect. You guys know when you meet him, you're like, oh my God, this is a big day in my life. I'm meeting Steven Spielberg. It goes beyond cleaning up your apartment. You prepare for it. But he knows that. And so he has a way of disarming people. In my experience, he was just so kind to me and a collaborator right from the beginning. And that's why he still makes movies. It's not for the money. He likes making the art, and he enjoys the collaborative process of working with all kinds of different people to make all different kinds of amazing art. And he's once your name becomes synonymous with your job, you've crushed it. Like Xerox, Spielberg, like your name is the cliche. I've got Spielberg on the line. Like he's like the Beatles. Yeah. But he's just one guy. I told him that. Like, I think the goal of an artist is to bring as much experience and joy and entertainment and illumination to your fellow humans as possible, who in one lifetime has pulled off that number more than Steven Spielberg and is still doing it. That's why I'm not sure about this thesis of his final argument. You never can count this guy out. He might hit us again in 20 years with another thesis. Someday somebody's going to tell the true history of our country and all the stuff that we didn't know that was going on behind the scenes. So he, I think, can open doors that no other filmmaker can open and has, and might be doing it again. I think he's going to do it again with Disclosure Day. I'm really vibrating with excitement to see it. And I'm excited to talk with you guys about it.
When you mentioned that he's become synonymous like Kleenex, and I was just thinking, when J.J. Abrams directed Super 8, every single review that came out called it Spielbergian, right?
Yeah. It's an Amblin movie. CT comes up at the beginning. That was a collaboration. And the thing that's amazing about Super 8 is then the Duffer Brothers went and did 8 seasons of Super 8 with Stranger Things because it was just kids on bikes and reimagining it was much more JJ's childhood and Steven's. Do you guys know the story about JJ curating a bunch of Steven's original Super 8 movies when he was a kid? When JJ Abrams was a kid, he was involved in some Super 8 restoration project, and they ended up giving all of Steven's old original Super 8 movies to JJ. And so like years later when they met about his first movie, he said, I have to tell you, I was that kid that worked on your Super 8 movies. And Steven's like, I knew that. Steven knew the whole meeting that it was this guy he'd met when he was a kid. He's just amazing like that. And everybody who works with him, I think, wants to work with him again, and nobody walks away having a bad experience on a Steven Spielberg movie.
Brent and I actually met when I had an office at Universal, and in the middle of producing this television series, we were all asked to pack up our bags and get out quickly because they were tearing down our offices to make way for the Jurassic Park ride.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And by the way, Brent and I both met Spielberg. Brent, tell us your I Met Steven story.
So I met him once in person. Well, I worked with him a couple times in person, and then I met him years later, re-met him again virtually. But my first experience with him when I was working at Electronic Arts back in the early 2000s, I had been brought on by EA to help them reboot their Command & Conquer franchise. And it turned out that right next door on the level that we were working at in the EA building in LA, Steven had sold an original idea for a game to EA. And so he had his early development team working right next door to us. And so I don't know how this happened, but at the time, the studio encouraged a lot of kind of cross-team collaboration. So I think once a month, our team on Command & Conquer, some of us, particularly the narrative people, would go over and sit in on their project and hear what they were up to. And then they would come over and sit on our project and hear, just getting some objectivity into the meeting. So a couple times I got to go in and hear what was up with this game project. And at the time, it didn't have a name. It was codenamed LMNO. And it was, as I said, an original idea by Steven about a female alien who was stranded here on Earth, a la The Man Who Fell to Earth, had some sort of mission that I never quite understood, but she had psychic powers and she was being hunted by government operatives. What was cool about it to me was that I could tell he was a gamer. He wasn't just saying, oh, video games are popular, so I want to go make a video game. In fact, as it turned out, his oldest son, Max, was working at EA on our team. I actually became friends with Max, and Max vouched for his dad and said, oh, no, he plays games all the time. That was very impressive to me. And he was so excited about this project, and he had so many ideas. It was energizing to be in the room with him.
I have a Spielberg game story, but it's going to lead us back to the big question about Spielberg that we have for you, Ernie. But the first time I met him was while we were still doing Dark Skies, and I got hired to write a video game for his Amblin company because they were going to have a video game division. The name of the video game was Ghost in the Machine. It was about a kind of an AI intelligence that came from alien contact or whatever. And of course, in the middle of writing that, they decided never to produce video games again, and they shuttered part of it. And that was that. Yeah. But when I met him, he came into the meeting. I was in his office waiting for him. They sat me down and he shook my hand and said, great to see you again, which I always loved because I thought, if the guy thinks that he's met me before, how great is that? Yeah. And then he said the thing that blew my mind. He goes, I'm a big fan of Dark Skies. Now, that takes me to the question for you. Dark Skies, of course, because we've talked about it, is where Brent and I were approached by folks that said they were from the Office of Naval Intelligence. They wanted to make a deal to allow UFO information access to for us to then help provide access for them into Dark Skies, that kind of thing. And we know that we got offered some kind of deal. But even as we were being offered that and talked to about that, we recalled very clearly that Spielberg over the years, ever since Close Encounters, has been rumored to, well, you know, people told him things. They gave him insight. So I'm just going to ask you straight out. Did you ever have a conversation about UFOs with Spielberg where he would imply in any way, whatever, that people had told them things?
I did not. I never felt comfortable bringing up that subject because we were together. We were always promoting the movie. and always geeking out about movies, and talked about his movies, and specifically talked about Close Encounters. Michael Kahn, who edited Close Encounters, also edited Ready Player One. And I got to hang out with him when Alan Silvestri was scoring the movie. And Michael Kahn, I was starstruck. And Michael Kahn, I guess, hasn't met too many people who were starstruck by him. But I was like, he set up an editing bay at Steven's house in Mobile, Alabama, and was editing Close Encounters each night while they were filming it and making rough cut as they were going. And Steven considers him a collaborator on Close Encounters, Michael Kahn, and he's edited a bunch of Steven's movies. He's a legend. I've actually found a quote in a book of interviews by Steven where he said something that basically is similar to what he just said at South by Southwest when he came to town last month, which is that I don't know anything any more than anybody else. He said this back in 1978 or 77 when Close Encounters came out. It's an enigma, and I don't always answer all the questions at the end of my movies. I answer most of the big questions, but I'm okay with leaving some things a mystery. And I don't know all the answers about UFOs, but I think it's a fascinating subject, and I love talking about it. And I think it's fascinating as a human story. And he's doing press for Close Encounters in 77. So if he had been approached before that, I think it would have been hard. It would have put him in a position to be dishonest in public, which Carl Sagan was clearly fine with doing. But Steven doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who would be a good liar because he's such a genuine person. And I think if they came to him, like you guys, if they came to him with the song and dance about how they wanted to feed him the truth, I think he knew enough about them. And just the way that he was depicting the military in Close Encounters, he knew enough about them to know not to trust them and that they would be feeding him spin and want him to pass on their information.
He's got them shutting down this vast area of Wyoming.
Yeah, I do remember seeing him talk about the letter he got from the Air Force asking him and all their reasons for, and he just got excited. He was gleeful about it. He's like, I knew something. That was just more confirmation that there was something up. I was telling you guys about that documentary about the making of Close Encounters in Mobile, Alabama, called Who Are You People? And it's really interesting to see the making of that film from the locals' perspective. But they talk about a lot of scenes that got cut. And one of them, they had to film a scene in a passenger airliner. And the people who filmed the scene talk about it. It got cut. But they all see a UFO during their flight. And then the plane lands and Air Force officials get on the plane and walk down the aisle and take everybody's cameras. And this one woman talks about, I was supposed to be angry at this guy as he yanks the camera out of my hand. I would love to see this scene, but it's never been shown. I never got that vibe. And the Project Serpo thing, I will tell you something interesting about Project Serpo you guys might not know is, so that comes out in 2005, right? It's leaked on those message boards. Mm-hmm. And it's leaked in the same way, in the same vibe as like Majestic 12 and other stuff that seems like a controlled release. And they discuss the way that the spacecraft of the Zeta Reticulans work on the planet Serpo in this document. And they talk about the layered bismuth magnesium stuff that Hal Puthoff was just talking about like 30 years later. I actually, when I met with To the Stars Academy, they let me hold the arts parts, layered bismuth magnesium in my hand. I think it's part of the courting process when they were trying to get people to work with them, is they let them hold arts parts. Yeah, I know. It worked. I was excited. But I asked Hal Puthoff about this. I was like, hey, how come this stuff about the layered bismuth magnesium was leaked in the Project Serpo stuff back in 2000? I asked Jim Semivan about this too. They both told me the same thing. They're like, yeah, sometimes when we want leak something out, we'll like bury it in a mound of misinformation. There'll be a little truth in there. And then, so when the truth comes out and then somebody says layered bismuth magnesium, whatever, it's like, oh, you got that from Project Serpo, and it discredits it. And it also, it's crafty. It's like tradecraft. But they both admitted to me that Project Serpo, that little bit of it had resurfaced in the To the Stars Academy years, where they talked about being a wave guide for terahertz energy. And Lynn Moulton Howe took this around and had all these metallurgists analyze it. And it was like layered at the micron level. And Steve Justice gave it to me and put it in my hand and said, we can't make this. He showed me a brick this big, and he's like, this is what it looks like if we try to layer bismuth and magnesium. This is as small as we can get it. And it was this big. And then they show me, and here it's layered like 1,000 times in this little So to me, that's like evidence they put in my hands. Here's something we can't make. And here's the guy who would know if we could make it telling you that we can't make it. I felt like because I had made a movie with Steven, that they were interested in helping me helping work on Secret Machines, which the film adaptation of that. But I could tell in my conversations with them, which I bet would be the same conversation Steven would have. Like, you guys are interested in telling the truth. I am on board. This is the biggest story of all time. I will help you tell the truth. Let's tell the truth together. It's not the vibe that I got. Yeah. It was like, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. We're gonna tell brand new lies that kind of modify our earlier lies. And I get why. That's the hardest job ever. I feel for those guys. You can't tell your friends without telling your enemies. And they'd love to tell us, all us red-blooded American boys, would be trustworthy with the truth, but they can't tell us without telling everyone else and all our strategic enemies. So they have to play this cat and mouse game with their own citizens and with their enemies. It's 3D chess, and it's so much fun to watch that it'll drive you crazy trying to follow it, because you never know how everything's embedded in misinformation on purpose. And when you get when the truth hits you, it's so hard to see the forest for the trees. But it's an endlessly diverting hobby.
Totally is. Yeah. By the way, Who Are You Guys refers to that scene in Close Encounters.
Who are you people? Who are you people? Yeah, Richard Dreyfuss.
Which is exactly what you'd want to say to somebody that has dragged you into this thing. Hey, listen.
We're still asking that question.
Yeah, exactly. That's
I think it's the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy.
Who are you people? Yeah.
Like, my impression of Steven Spielberg was that he's just a big kid. He's like a big, exuberant kid. And just like you, he geeks out on things and he gets super excited. And he did not come across at all as somebody that's holding secrets to me. However, I would be remiss if I didn't remind the audience, and for anyone who's a new listener, in our episode 2, I told a story about something that happened to me by a Texas guy, Toby Hooper, who I was previously very good friends with and was developing an alien-related project on the side. And so when we needed a director for Dark Skies, I recommended Toby. I was the one that got us down that path. Oh. And while we were spending time together in pre-production, we were on a location scout up in Newhall Ranch, up north of LA, up in the hills, looking for a place to shoot our big crop circle sequence from the Dark Skies pilot. And at the end of that day, Toby and I were down in a kind of a roadhouse having dinner. There was a small production crew, and everyone else was talking business and schedules, and Toby and I were sitting by ourselves having dinner. And I said, hey, Toby, so you're finally going to have one over on Steven, because I knew about their relationship. They're very friendly since going back to Poltergeist, but they were also very competitive. And I said, you're going to have a crop circle on film before he does. And he said, but I'm never going to be ahead of Steven in this category. I was like, what do you mean? And he said, he knows a lot. After Jaws, some people from, I think it was Naval Intelligence or one of those agencies, they approached him and they offered him a deal to learn a bunch of stuff. And I'm pretty sure he took it. He got all sorts of inside information on a couple of things, like a lot of things. Now, obviously people can say, oh, he was just bullshitting you. That was not Toby Hooper's nature. If anyone knew him, he was the most down to earth, kind of grounded guy. I think Bryce will vouch for that, for all of our times working with him. And I'm left to, all I have is that. I have to take it at face value. This is what he told me. Now, this is what Steven told him. He didn't hear this. It wasn't a friend of a friend story. And so either A, Steven was messing with him, which could have been, because I don't know the nature fully of their relationship, but I do know that I feel pretty confident that Toby wasn't messing with me.
Brent, we can say one thing. We can say that Spielberg has gotten to make his crop circle, because in the trailers for Disclosure Day, there's a major crop circle sequence. So
state-of-the-art crop circle. Yeah.
And by the way, he makes a very fine crop circle from the clip I saw, because we knew how hard ours was. I just wanted to throw out there that I worked on Taken. And Ernie, I don't even know if you know this, but I was doing the Crow television series, and when it got canceled, they were right next to us in the bungalows that were across the street. And one of my friends was one of the executive producers, Les Boheme. So I ended up working 6 months with the writing team on Taken, with him and Manny Cotto, who was the other executive producer.
So cool.
And then Spielberg sent everybody home. After 6 months of a writer's room, he had something else he had to do, and everybody went home. But I didn't get sent home. I got Me and Les were told to go write scripts. I got to write one script. I'm not even going to get into that. But we did talk to him on multiple occasions. And I didn't get the big kid kind of thing as much as he was very businesslike. And if the three of us were to have an unguarded UFO conversation and just kick it around for a couple of hours, you'd be saying, I don't know, did you see this? What about that? And Brent would say, no, I saw that, but what about this? And we'd all be throwing stuff in. That's the way he came across to me. Clearly very knowledgeable and well-read, but there's thousands of those guys on X these days. Knowing a lot about the UFO topic could happen to anybody. But I thought he was a great guy, enjoyed working on Taken, and thought that was great. I just wanted to do something to set the tone because we want to get into a couple of things. I'm going to read you a list of things that Spielberg either produced, directed, or wrote, or all three. Close Encounters, E.T., Gremlins, Amazing Stories, Batteries Not Included, Gremlins 2, Sequest, Men in Black, Invasion America, AI, Taken, Men in Black 2, War of the Worlds, Transformers, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, Super 8, Cowboys and Aliens, Transformers, Dark of the Moon, Falling Skies, Men in Black 3, Under the Dome, Extant, Transformers, Age of Extinction, Transformers, The Last Night, Bumblebee, Men in Black International, Transformers, Rise of the Beast, Encounters, Gremlins, Mogwai, Transformers 1, Disclosure Day. So
it's just a pile of money, just a pile of money. Let me just
throw this out to the group. What is he trying to say with all those? Because what Brent and I
movie tickets,
have always said,
asses in seats.
If he has a certain point of view about ET contact, those projects are all over the map. Yeah. They cover the whole spectrum. So I just wanted to ask you, when you hear all those, and we all, and I bet you've seen almost all of them. Many people have. What do you think they say about alien contact in his head? What's his state of mind about what alien contact means based on those projects?
I don't think all of them are necessarily trying to say anything. I think aliens are cool. Science fiction is cool. He loves science fiction. And I think he can get behind, he recognizes things that would be appealing to a lot of people and have storytelling appeal. I think, but only some of them seem to be like Taken and Close Encounters and E.T. are ones that he actually is trying to examine the phenomenon from an artistic standpoint. But I don't think it's that much different than what you guys were doing with Dark Skies. And you were I'm a big Dark Skies fan. I've told Bryce, by the way, but I love that show. And more than the X-Files, because there was a lot more realness and true history hidden in your show and real. My favorite is Keith Carradine playing Lonnie Zamora. That's, I think, my favorite episode. He's so good in that. But you guys had a little bit of truth and a little bit of fiction, because you have to have a little bit of fiction to tell us a story in 45 minutes or however long. Mm-hmm. You have to fudge and combine details. And sometimes it's just fun Howard Hughes is in Vegas, so why not put him in the story? Then it's not necessarily you're trying to say that really happened. And I think, and that's what you guys were doing with Taken as well, like taking all the different lore, mixing it up. And I think you might be doing that a little bit too. The screenwriter for Disclosure Day is David Koepp, who was also screenwriter on a few Jurassic Park movies and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is actually the movie that establishes that warehouse as Area 51. It was never said that it was Area 51 in Raiders, but in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, it's established as being an Area 51. But I don't know I thought it was just a government warehouse in Raiders. But maybe, I don't know, I have to go back and look at the script and see if my understanding is the very first public mention of Area 51 is in UFO Cover-Up Live on a map that appears in 1989, even before 88, before even George did his Lazar story, like a year before it was. But anyhow,
I did not know that little factoid. That's
cool.
UFO Cover-Up Live is a television show in I believe it was 88, where famously they had some interviews that were disguised interviews in the shadow. And one of them was a guy saying, yeah, we had an alien and it's dead now, but it used to love strawberry ice cream.
Hey, there's also Paul. Steven has a cameo in the movie Paul, which is, have you guys ever seen that?
Oh, yeah.
Where he's talking to Paul, the alien at Area 51 to get ideas for ET. It's like a flashback phone call. Yeah. I love it. See, I think he likes to have fun with the idea that he's on the inside. The Men in Black films depict that. And the Men in Black has the most succinct thesis on why disclosure will never happen in the dialogue of Men in Black. Is Tommy Lee Jones is telling Will Smith there's always like a Carillion death ray or an invading alien force. The only way all these people go about their lives is if they do not know about it. That's like the summation and kind of justification for Men in Black and all the horrible stuff they've done to people and all the years of intimidation and screaming and threatening to make people disappear in the desert. Men in Black is almost like propaganda for them. It makes them these smooth, suit-wearing good guys who are there fighting the good fight and not trying to keep us all in the dark.
Listen, while we were doing the research on this thing, I just came across a couple of things I thought were fascinating, which is going back to 1985 when he did Amazing Stories. They did one episode called Fine Tuning that follows high school kids
with the radio,
who build an antenna and discover they can pick up alien television transmissions, revealing the aliens are fascinated by 1950s American TV, and they're headed to Earth to experience Hollywood directly, which seems like there's an episode right up Sound, Light, and Frequency. Brent. That's
one of my favorite episodes, starring Matthew Laborteaux. Great episode,
Yeah, and then in 93 on Sequest DSV, they started out with Sequest doing more exploration of the oceans, but they started going deep into USOs. And they did another one that was called Such Great Patience. And they discover a 1,000,000-year-old alien spacecraft on the ocean floor. Spielberg, and as far as I understand it, in both these TV series, major involvement from him, looking at all the scripts and putting in his input. It isn't just, I guess what I'm saying is, it isn't just his filmography where the man is putting all this stuff in. He went through a period in the mid 2010s, I guess, where he does Under the Dome, and the dome turns out to be an alien thing that's holding everybody in. And then he does Extant with Halle Berry, and that brings in, I guess, what you would call is some kind of hybrid. So I just want to ask you this, Ernie. When you think of all this stuff, and you've seen the trailers yourself for Disclosure Day, is he saying hybrids? Is that because in Taken, that's what we said. We went deep into the hybrid zone for Taken. But frankly, Brent, you and I did it in Dark Skies before Taken. I mean, we had abductions and hybrids. So is hybrids the truth he's talking about, do you think?
The trailer seemed to imply that. He's a master of misdirection too. He'll make you think one thing's going to happen based on the trailer, and then it's something else completely. But just the imagery, the shots that I keep thinking about again and again. First is the UFO coming out of the clouds. Yeah. First time I've seen a flying saucer in a Steven Spielberg movie since E.T., I guess. I guess you could count some of those things in War of the Worlds. But it's a Close Encounters kind of image of coming out of the cloud, the skies.
It feels very ILM.
Yeah. And the shot that they added in the most recent trailer of the Roswell footage, which, and that's so tied in with Disclosure and the mythos and the lore of Disclosure. It seems like he wants to make like maybe it's his thesis now. Close Encounters was his thesis then as a 27-year-old guy. He's had a whole lot of life experience. And like you guys, I bet he has had, not just before Close Encounters, I bet they keep coming at him. And it's not just the same guys. It's not it's not just JC. It's the different people show up. Also, I think there's people embedded in all the different movie studios, just like there are in all the different news studios. There are probably you could never even tell. And it's so easy to keep movies from getting made. You just buy it and then put it in development forever, and it'll never get made. It's the easiest thing ever. You just give some money, and then you can prevent that story from getting told. So it's real fascinating to me. But he is above and beyond that. He can make any movie he wants, regardless of the subject matter. If he wants to make a movie about UFO disclosure, no one can sabotage him or stop him from making it. He can send whatever message he wants, and the whole world will receive it. And he's earned that power as an artist to make a statement and to have everybody's waiting for it. And so I can't wait. June 12th. Counting the days.
Well, one of my favorite things to do is embrace the concept of pattern recognition. Look to see, is there any signal in the noise? And as you were pointing out, Bryce, like the spectrum of work that he's done, at first you'd go, he's just done everything. Like he's done all the cool stuff, and it's most of it's all been incredibly successful. So he's had his finger on the pulse of pop culture, right? And that's maybe the only defining thing you can say. However, I just want to point out a couple things. When you look at his 70s and 80s films, or anything he did back then, there was a general sense of the more kind of benign alien story that was more about the curiosity, the wonder. And then as we got moved into the turn of the century, it was most of his dark stuff came post 9/11, right? Taken came 2002. And there was a series, and then he did War of the Worlds and whatnot. And so if I was trying to find a pattern to anything that he did, and this could have been something that was completely unintended at the time, it's that his stuff is culturally relevant, right? His movies reflect the consciousness of the era in a way that either he's aware of that, or it's just he has his finger on the pulse so acutely that he knows what stories the public needs to hear. Now, flash forward all the way to Disclosure Day, and you think, well, that's the pattern holding up, because we are in the midst of a president who has just gotten an argument with a previous president about who knows more about aliens and who's broken codes and all of that kind of thing, leading to now President Trump being harassed by various members of Congress to release files which he says are going to happen, files and videos. And so is it a coincidence then that Steven Spielberg has a movie coming out at this very culturally impactful time called Disclosure Day?
Well, the only thing I can say, Brent, by the way, is that the last thing Donald Trump probably wants to do is give aid and comfort to a Hollywood liberal. I don't know.
Well, that would be, if it'll misdirect everyone away from everything else that's going on.
That would do
I think about somewhere there's a ministry of disinformation in our country, and somebody sat at a typewriter and wrote up thousands of pages of Project Serpo and snuck in. It was somebody's job to insert the truth into this fiction and then release it. Same with the Majestic 12 documents. Mm-hmm. If, any of those, I think that was a controlled releases. And that's what's fascinating to me about JC coming to visit you guys. You got to think they send somebody did they send somebody to Chris Carter when he did the X-Files? This book that Bob Balaban, who plays Lacombe in Close Encounters, he wrote a diary with all the dates of the date George Lucas came to the set and the date that Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale. And he talks about using the Identimat hand scanner that Bob Lazar talks about that's in Close Encounters. It's real fascinating stuff. But he talks about J. Allen Hynek coming and visiting the set. And one night they're all up and J. Allen Hynek's just telling UFO stories and creeping everybody out. And Steven's like a jukebox. Tell him about that one. Steven tells a story. Have you ever heard this story about some women in Texas who saw a UFO and on the side of it were painted the letters UFO?
No.
I found an old interview where Steven talks about this as an example of the trickster phenomenon. He said he read everything when he was researching Close Encounters, including all the National Enquirer tabloid. He read everything and distilled it all down and put it into Close Encounters. So I think, and that's what you guys were doing with Dark Skies. You guys read everything, distilled it all down, and what if we put this and pulled in all these threads? And I think he's doing the same thing. And the other idea I wanted to throw at you guys is, if we believe remote viewing is a real thing and that Project Stargate is real, and a lot of regular people have the ability to remote view, they just don't know it. I think maybe the only time people in their lives ever try to remote view without realizing it is when they try to sit down and write a story. Well, what would happen? And they go into their imagination. And doesn't it stand to reason, if remote viewing is real, that some writers would be remote viewers without realizing it? What if Stephen King is a really badass remote viewer and he's pulling in threads from he doesn't know where? Same with songwriters. Some songwriters people don't always know where creativity comes from. What if it's coming from some quantum connection that we all have to a collective? It's real fascinating, but Stephen might be one of those people. Not only taps into the zeitgeist and the collective unconscious, but also ends up changing it. I always think about Jaws and how growing up in the pool, you just done. That's because of Stephen. Kids in swimming pools all around the world, making this sound because he decided to do that in his movie. And it's a part of the whole culture of the world, all around the world, as a result of, and I think Close Encounters had that effect too. I know when I saw it on television, I had UFO dreams for weeks after that, because it was just such a profound The first shot of that movie just jolts you, right? When it's dark and you hear the music, and then wham, like the brightest light possible. Just doing that to everybody's pupils all around the world at the beginning of Close Encounters, like making everybody's pupils dilate, and then tells you the story. I love that movie so much. I keep going back to it.
Hey, Ernie, you have seen many thousands of films. Have you seen any Transformers films?
I believe I saw the first or second Transformers movie. I did not. They started to blur together to me.
There's been 7 of them made, right? Yeah. And there is an evolution in the storyline about non-human intelligence or machine intelligence that evolves in these things, and literally 7 of them. I don't know if Spielberg has any association with those films other than being an executive producer and passing off on them, or do you think he's been involved in them? What's your take?
Actually, AI was the last screenplay credit that he took. Mm-hmm. Before this, he takes story credit for Fabelmans, obviously, and this I think he has story by credit on, but the last screenplay credit he had before AI was Close Encounters. Yeah. And he said in interviews that's because he couldn't get anybody else to write it the way that he wanted. You guys know about Night Skies?
Yes.
That's the family under attack, right? And then it
Hopkinsville, right?
Right? And then it becomes E.T. He abandons that to go make
E.T.
So
the family in Hopkinsville threatened to sue him if he made their story about their farm getting attacked, and that would still make a great movie. I don't think I've ever seen that depicted. It would be big budget, the Kelly Hopkinsville story. But it's like scary E.T. Yeah. Like E.T. with like teeth. And it could have been a much darker. It was envisioned as a sequel. Ron Cobb was actually originally going to direct Dark Skies, and then Steven decided he wanted to do it, and he wanted to make it E.T. instead. But Ron Cobb still ended up getting like a point.
You mean Night? Just to correct.
Night Skies.
You mean Night Skies?
Night Skies. Because they're so close. Night Skies.
I want to circle back to something that you mentioned, Ernie, because it's something we've touched a little bit on in some previous episodes, but it's also something I fundamentally agree with, that the nature of creativity and where does it come from, right? And we've seen it before in Hollywood where it's like all of a sudden no one's made a Western for 10 years, and now there's 3 studios making Westerns at the same time. Right. It's that idea that something in the collective unconscious out there is just percolates up, and a bunch of people get access to it independently of each other, and they all get inspired, and they all bring it to the market at the same time. But I hadn't actually considered what you implied, which is a lot of times remote viewing is not just looking at other places on the planet, but other places in the future or in the past, that there's a temporal aspect of remote viewing. And so I think you have to, at some point, consider, and we've even talked about this in some of the episodes as well, this idea that a story that comes out presages actual events that are going to happen decades later, right? Now, is that because the story came out and it influenced people, set things in motion? Or is it because the creator unwittingly got a vision, didn't realize it was coming through the collective consciousness in the future, and actually is writing about things that are yet to come? And so I say this because I want to bring up just one very specific example that amuses me, simply because you guys have worked more with Steven. I worked a lot with George Lucas when I was doing the Clone Wars, and got to spend a couple weeks each year at the ranch, going to the main house and breaking stories with him and Dave Filoni. And so I got to know George pretty well. So I'm particularly interested in one of the titles on this list that you read off, Bryce, which is The Crystal Skull, Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, because of course that's George and Steven working together. And I think we can all agree that Steven will never turn down a good alien story. However, he did not want to bring aliens into this Indiana Jones story. That was George's idea. And George, who I know, I spent enough time with him, so much of what happened in his childhood influenced everything about him as an artist. And so he grew up, right? Star Wars was because he loved Flash Gordon. And so he loved all those 50s sci-fi movies and whatnot. And he really felt like this was another area of pop culture that he wanted to bring into the Indiana Jones franchise. But Steven felt like, I've already done aliens. I don't want to bring that into this franchise. And so they ended up settling on interdimensional beings, not full aliens like Steven had done before. But I think here's the interesting thing. The actual lore of the crystal skull is loosely tied to some kind of regional mythology about something in that region in South America, going all the way back to, again, they tied it into the legend of Akator, which is related to the lost city of gold, El Dorado, all of this stuff. And that the idea that this city was built with interdimensional beings' help, and that the crystal skulls represented the cumulative knowledge. And anyway, I say all of this because the representation of those aliens and the ties to beings that helped influence culture in South America is all tied to or very related to the Nazca mummies. The whole phenomenon that came out in 2016, 17, I think, not too long ago. Those kind of broke into pop culture and they became a thing, and they've been debunked and they've been proven and they've been debunked and they've been proven. And now we're in that stalemate where it's like there's so much noise, nobody knows what to think of it. But
I know what to think. They're real. You can't admit they're real. Like, to admit they're real is to admit all of it's real. The questions never end. So they have to not be real. But how many doctors need to go down there and say it's not constructed, and they put the DNA online, unless they're faking millions of lines of DNA code. I've been saying this to George Knapp and everybody for years. Like, guys need to take a long look at those mummies. But I get what,
And here's the last little piece I want to string together here, because I'm a big pattern recognition person, and I was looking for, is there anything here, or am I just going down another rabbit hole? And what I came up with was the fact that I remember when they first showed the Nazca mummies, the first image, and I said, E.T., this is E.T. So what idiots. They faked this by taking the most recognizable alien and made it look exactly like E.T. What a dumb thing to do if you're trying to fake it in terms of credibility. Now, here's the interesting thing, though. Those aliens, those Nazca mummies, have 3 fingers. Now, if you go back and you look at the Close Encounters, the aliens in Close Encounters, 3 fingers.
Oh, yeah.
The aliens in Taken, 3 fingers.
And aliens in the latest Disclosure Day trailer,
3 fingers. Crystal Skull, 3 fingers. So now, this all could be complete coincidence, right? And it's just a stylistic choice. But I come back to, as we started the episode, saying, is there anything to Disclosure Day, like as actual disclosure? And even if you put aside the idea that does Stephen know something or doesn't he know something, there are certain aspects of Disclosure Day that, whether it's hybrids, whether it's 3-fingered aliens, whether it's a monitoring center a la Men in Black, whether it's aliens taking the form of animals or other, like all of this feels very not real, or true, but it's certainly a lot of things that people believe nowadays. So there was one part of that interview, Bryce, that you mentioned that Stephen gave at CinemaScape, or was it CinemaScope or Scape or something, whatever it was, CinemaCon. In Vegas, where he also said that this movie is going to have more truth than fiction. Yeah. That is a ballsy thing to say, because that implies you know what the truth is. And I still come back to, okay, if that's true and that movie's coming out, as a lot of his movies do, where it's representing and reflecting the cultural zeitgeist and maybe the unconsciousness, how much truth is going to be in that movie?
I love what you just said, Brent. You can't really say it's going to have more truth, a lot of truth in it, if you don't actually feel like you know what the truth is. The question is, why does he know that? And we got to wrap this up. And by the way, Ernie, you'll have to become a friend of the show, because we're not done, obviously.
No.
But at the very beginning, I had made the statement that I thought this Disclosure Day might be his closing argument. And you said, I'm not quite so sure. Why don't you expand on that and kind of wrap up your feelings about Disclosure Day and what it might represent as we lurch for the finish line here?
And maybe even include what you hope it represents.
Yeah.
Oh, it would be wonderful if our government or the military industrial complex or the Zenith Group or whoever's running the UFO reverse engineering program and or the disinformation wing, it would be wonderful if they like, all right, the jig is up. We can't keep this a secret anymore. Why don't we go to the world's greatest filmmaker and have him help us tell the truth? And maybe it's like Jackie Gleason and Nixon, right? Maybe they took him in to the blue room and showed him the bodies and told him about the hybrid breeding program. And that we've been allowing people to get snatched out of their beds and implanted and tagged like animals and been helping keep a secret. I don't know. I have a hard time believing they would ever tell a filmmaker that unless they had a real specific mission in mind or he's the last guy who would play along. He's like, he's a real artist and he has a vision of what he wants to do with each movie and all different themes he explores. And it's always, like you said, I don't think he always spoon feeds the audience. I think he leaves some things ambiguous, and Disclosure Day might be that way as well. But he's definitely planting a flag at Roswell, and it seems to be planting a flag at humans or people who look human that aren't completely human. I keep thinking about Obama, the Obamas, and after getting out of office and their production company announcing that Betty and Barney Hill movie, which I don't think is ever going to get made or was ever going to get made. I think that's just the sneakiest way possible for Obama to say, oh, you might want to take a look at this story over here. I was president for 8 years, and I think out of all the movies I could make, this would be a good one to make. But he doesn't even have to say that. He just has to like put his name on it, and then it goes away, and it's not a front. But to me, I think that's one of the ways to say something without saying it or breaking the law or getting in trouble with your security clearance. Just giving it your attention. And Steven giving something his attention takes years of his life to make a movie, and he must have an artistic reason and a motivation for wanting to revisit this all these years later and tell this kind of story and include all these real elements like Roswell. But it's a pretty creepy moments depicted in that trailer. It depicts that moment that Bryce and Richard Dolan dissected after Disclosure. You see it happening on television in the trailer, that moment when the whole world finds out the truth. There are aliens among us. I haven't seen any shots of like looting or people running through the street with their hair on fire. It'd be interesting to see how you depict that moment happening and it not being like Independence Day, not be people running and streets flooded and people running for the hills to try to get out of the way of the death ray. Or what does it do to society if that's all true and there are people who look human living among us who aren't completely human, and our government's known about it for how long? All the world's governments have known about it and they've been keeping it a secret. Like, it's just a bombshell that just keeps detonating. And you can see why fiction, starting back in the 40s or the 1950s, like using fiction in movies to prepare people. If that's been going on in Hollywood that's 70 years of movies about UFOs.
You just said in your last statement about 40 things that I want to talk for 5 minutes about. I don't know what I'm going to do about that. In particular, Brent, you and I will have to talk Betty and Barney Hill at some point because I've written that screenplay myself.
Oh, that's so good. I love that pilot, Bryce.
But anyway, here's the one thing. I just want to go back to Disclosure Day for a moment because you've each sort of laid out a vision for this thing. I'm going to take a different point of view on it, which is in 2017, we had the New York Times come out and we thought, well, there's a game changer. No, not really. I mean, it set us on a new track, but it didn't change everything overnight. Then David Grush came out in 23 and we thought that'll be a game changer. And he even testified before Congress and he's a pretty good quality witness. And that didn't exactly get the game changed. And then we had Age of Disclosure just last year where everybody said, oh my gosh, this is such an incredible film and all these people talking. That'll certainly get everybody's. I said it myself. I went, this has got to be a game changer for people to see it. Wasn't really. Here's what I am going to say. The commonality of all three of those is they were more or less truth delivered as truth. They were in the real world of news and so forth. I think the game changer is going to be Disclosure Day. And it's not even truth. It's Hollywood truth, just like Dark Skies was Hollywood truth for us and other people have done it, put out portions of it. I don't know that everything in Disclosure Day is going to be true. I guess there's different ways to look at what the truth is, but I think that Steven Spielberg is such a powerful social force that the one thing that he said at CinemaCon that is going to be true is people are going to have a lot of questions. And what moves the needle, what does change a game, and we're all game players, so we're talking about a game being changed. What does change a game is when people start to question what's really going on here. What does all this really mean? So my take on Disclosure Day is, first of all, I'll stipulate everything that two of you just said, but I also think it's going to be a powerful and important social moment, probably more important than if Donald Trump were to declassify an HD quality gun camera photo of a craft right now. I don't think it would change the game as much as Spielberg's movie is going to. That's my point of view.
I agree with everything you just said. Well, actually, I agree with both of you. I do want to just throw out one other possibility, though, playing on something that you mentioned, Ernie, which is that this idea that if somebody came to Steven and said, hey, we want you to do this, that as an artist, he'd be like, no, I have a vision. I want to make my own story. And also that idea that, well, why would they, after all these years, go to Steven Spielberg and have him have a movie that actually discloses anything? I think we're at a very unique period in history where everything's happening all at once.
Yeah.
And with the internet and AI, and you never know. I wake up every morning and I have no idea what to expect. And there's no certainty anymore at all. And what Spielberg represents to me is certainty. He is the most trusted voice in Hollywood, right? You can maybe not like everything he's done, but his body of work is like no other. And so if the government, the military, was ever involved in Hollywood, whether he was given a deal back before Close Encounters or at any time along, it's right now, at this point in history, that if you wanted to use Hollywood to condition people to some hard truths that they were going to have to get used to, hybrids living among us, the government having been complicit in all sorts of stuff going on behind the scenes, people being monitored, just a lot of these ideas, I would, if I was in the government, say, there's only one person I'm going to go to. It's going to be Steven Spielberg, because if he comes out with this, it's going to be taken seriously. And the fact that it's converging with a president who is about to disclose or threatening to disclose feels like it's all, obviously, I know from my experiences talking to John Harrington, who was the person that disclosed to me, that the president is more of a figurehead. There are people well above the president that are pulling the strings. So if Trump is actually out there bull in a china shop threatening to disclose stuff, it's because somebody's allowing this to happen, wherever that's going to go, in the same way that somebody could be allowing this movie to come out at this very important inflection point in history. And if I was Steven Spielberg, yes, I'd want to tell my story. I'd want to have my vision and whatnot, but I would also want to be one of the people that was trusted enough to usher in a new age of humanity, right? To be the person that finally, after all of these years, brings truth to the people because he feels they should know. That is more than almost anything he's done as an entertainer. When history gets written as the person that brought disclosure and to humanity and changed the nature of reality, that's how you become immortalized.
It's a great point. Yeah. And Ernie, you are our guest and we have to wrap up. So I'm going to give you the last word, my friend. What do you think about all this?
That would be the cherry on the top, crowning achievement for him, better than a wall of Oscars, than to be the one filmmaker trusted with telling the story that needs to be told in the most gentle and engaging way and can convey a message. Yeah, he would be the guy. He would be the guy that I would pick. But even if it's just a good story and he's just playing with the lore and the tropes and riffing on it, there might be truth hidden in it, just like there was in Close Encounters. Yeah. And I don't know. I just don't expect a clear-cut story, but it could be people being interviewed, in tears as they leave the theater, which is how it was with E.T., but for different reasons, hopefully. Yeah. But I don't know. I'm excited to talk with you guys about it after we all get to see it.
Well, listen, Ernie, we thank you for, first of all, we thank you for a lot of things. Thank you for coming in, but thank you for having that incredible background, which obviously has raised the game a little bit around here.
It's all it's good for. Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
it was great having you. We thank you for that and your good thoughts. And for everyone who's watching or listening, just know that our plan is to follow and track this film. We have episodes coming up that we'll be talking about Men in Black, as we said, but even a little more Spielberg. And we intend to, on the day that Disclosure Day comes out, we hope to have an episode that comes out as well, where we will be not really reviewing the film. That would be reviewing it as a film. Brent, I would put it differently. We're going to be looking at it as a historical moment, I think.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think more than anything, truth, fiction, whatever, this film is going to start conversations.
Gentlemen, I think we should end by saying something Brent and I have said at the end before. It is the original title of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and it is Watch the Skies.
Watch the Skies.
Watch the Skies.
Soundlight and Frequency is an iHeart podcast produced by Stellar Productions. It's executive produced by Nick Johnson, and for Stellar, Jackie Zabel. Our show's music was written by Anna Stumpf and Hamilton Lighthouser. And your hosts and executive producers are Bryce Zabel, that's me, and Brent Friedman. Watch the Skies.